Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Ryan Palmer, Senior Technical and Strategic Advisor for FedRAMP at the General Services Administration, and Chad Poland, the Cybersecurity Product Manager for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And I'm really excited to be here today with two people who are leading very important cloud security initiatives for the federal government. I'd love to start with you here in the studio, Chad. Just talk a little bit about, what you're doing at CISA. I know the Secure Cloud Business Applications Program, or SCUBA as it's artfully called, is a really important program for you. Tell us about that program and how it's evolving here.
Yeah, sure. First off, thanks for having me. So SCUBA started in earnest relatively, like 3 years ago in response to the SolarWinds incident. Since then, we've been on a fast-paced journey to kind of mature and release a lot of our products. Since then, we released our version 1 of our Microsoft 365 baselines in December of last year. And then we also released our first version, our draft version of our Google Workspace baseline back in December as well. Went through a very robust comment period for those, got a lot of feedback. Currently, we're out there piloting our GWS baselines with the federal agencies. So anyone out there who runs that in your environment and is interested in participating, reach out to my team. And so, we're really kind of, spearheading and kind of, trying to match the demand that we're getting from the federal government. Also noting, that our products aren't just fit for the government. There's users of Microsoft 365 products and GWS products worldwide. Part of our reasoning why we release these on GitHub open source. And so we're getting a lot of, feedback from comments, from pilots, and, through the GitHub community, which has been fantastic.
All right, and these are business applications that are used, as you mentioned, across the world. And essentially these baselines tell agencies and other organizations, hey, here's how you can securely configure them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the strength of our baselines is that they're specific. They're very, we call them prescriptive. So it tells an end user exactly what setting they need to change, why they should change it via like a rationale statement. And then we've actually gone a step further and provided mappings to MITRE ATT&CK so that they know if they turn this setting on, what actually TTP it's going to prevent, right? Which is pretty fantastic. And then secondly, what I like to call, as I say, we're operationalizing the guidance. We're not just putting static guidance out there. We've provided associated assessment tools. So for Microsoft, we have Scuba Gear, and for GWS, we have Scuba Goggles.
All right, we can certainly get into what you're seeing in terms of adoption later on, but I want to turn to Ryan here. It's a busy time for FedRAMP. Ryan, tell us a little bit about the evolution of the program here today and where it's going.
Thank you very much. Certainly, it is a busy time for FedRAMP. FedRAMP's mission is really to make it safe and easy for the U.S. government to take full advantage of the cloud services in our marketplace, and very well aligned to CISA's roles as well. From a governance structure, right, we have a newly announced board. We also have a advisory group, the technical advisory group, which is going to represent a diverse skill set and add a lot of value to the program. I think they're also going to be able to represent some of the experiences that our cloud service provider and agency communities might be facing, not just in the cybersecurity domain, but also across other domains like rolling out new applications, building systems, integrations. The most exciting thing most excitement I have is really around our roadmap. That's, I think, the first roadmap the FedRAMP program has released. And it's really focusing on better responding to some of the challenges that our customers have, taking a more leadership role in the cybersecurity realm, and also reducing some of the times and costs related to FedRAMP authorizations. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Our roadmap is going to be built around partnership with organizations like CISA, our cloud service provider community, and the agency community. We're working with DISA for low-touch review processes. So there's a lot of exciting work there, and it's built around that community engagement.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's kind of these high-level changes. OMB, the White House Office of Management and Budget, released a draft FedRAMP memo last fall. And so as you're waiting to kind of see these high-level policy changes finalized, you mentioned the roadmap. How else is the FedRAMP process iterating, evolving today to respond to some of those customer challenges that you just mentioned?
Well, I think, when we put our roadmap together, we've certainly considered that OMB draft memo in that process. So I think working with that draft memo and considering some of the outcomes that it was outlining are how we built our roadmap. So I think we're responsive to the draft, and I think we'll be responsive to any future memo. The focus on addressing some of the challenges in the marketplace, specifically, the time to authorization and getting improved access to the marketplace. Agencies have a need for cloud services to meet their mission needs. How do we get those services into the market and authorized and available to agencies is, I think, one of the key areas our roadmap focuses on, and I think that's also reflected in the draft memo.
And when you're talking about that speed to the marketplace, what does the role that automation plays in helping FedRAMP meet that accelerated demand?
So, when a CSP goes through the authorization process today, they're providing us a lot of digital paper, right? We've got, 700 pages of digital documentation, but that's not something we can really say is data that we can automate around. FedRAMP, we recently, David Waltermeyer from NIST came over, who's one of the leads on OSCAL. He's now on the FedRAMP program. So first step in our automation journey is really getting digital documents into a data format. Once we get there, and I think we're going to get there fairly quickly, we can start using that data and Kanban data to start speeding up the process. So when a cloud service provider is going through authorization, right, they're developing all these documents, they're getting an assessment, they're getting an agency ATO, and then the FedRAMP program begins its review process. We catch errors and issues in that process, and ideally those are caught way earlier, right? This is unplanned work caught late in a cloud service provider's lifecycle. We want to turn that unplanned work into planned work, and we want to turn that into early planned work, right? So through automation, I see us providing increased insights to cloud service providers early in the process, and that will allow them to plan the remediation, or even maybe it's not an issue. Kind of an analogy to this is like tax preparation software, right? Mm-hmm. Your tax preparation software is going to alert you if you put that you have 30 kids, but you've only provided 3 details for 3, or you're donating 10 times your income to charitable donations. Like, a good piece of software will flag those things. Maybe it's right, but that can let you fix those defects before you get to submission to the IRS. Like, we need to provide a similar type of experience where cloud service providers know what we will flag and have more insight into how we're reviewing packages.
And Chad, you mentioned how Scuba is very prescriptive, and I'd love to dive into a little bit more about the key security features for securing these widely used business applications that we've also seen hacked a lot because oftentimes misconfigurations.
Yeah, and so like what we like to say is, there's different bodies out there that secure, like, or certify the vehicle as safe, right? Yeah. But we're telling the end user how to operate that vehicle safely. So we're giving them very prescriptive guidance on what to do and the outcome that will prevent if they do it, right? So, in this analogy, I'm putting a seatbelt on, and that's going to prevent doing this. And, in our baseline, that's, enable phishing-resistant MFA for all users. This is why that's important. I think that's a very common message in CISA is phishing-resistant MFA. But the fact that we're telling people very prescriptive, direct guidance is helpful. It takes out all the all the vagueness of kind of some security documentation is relatively high level, and it's more about control families. Ours is very, very direct and very prescriptive, and so it really empowers the end user and those admins to make informed decisions. And so that's a key feature. Number 2 is specifically with Google and Microsoft, but this is across the board to all SaaS products, is these products are updated weekly. which is fantastic for the end user. It provides, new features, new integrations, but that also injects complexity for the end user when they're having to constantly deal with new settings to configure, new things to turn off or on. And so us keeping up to date for Microsoft and Google, we're taking out that guesswork. So they're not sitting there and, they're not making configuration once, and then, 5 months later, they found out that there was a setting that was, set to open and, kind of was leaving their back door open, right? So us providing, very prescriptive guidance, the assessment tools, the automation for them to audit that is very key. And then, thirdly is the time factor is, we're keeping up with the pace of the releases from these two vendors, which is, very important for the end user to make sure that they're continuing to stay at a heightened security level.
And I think Scuba has piloted these tools with agencies, and now as you've mentioned, you're looking to expand them now that they're out there. What have you learned from the pilots? Where have you seen success and also challenges as you look to scale?
Yeah, so first off, I think, for Microsoft, we piloted it with 12 agencies across the federal civilian executive space. CISA, they've used both our baselines for both of their Microsoft and Google platforms. They run scans weekly. In some instances, they've actually provided, elevated security configurations for, specifics, which is great. We encourage any agency to do that if they want to, but our guidance is a baseline. Some of the things that were kind of very enlightening, I think, engaging on some of these pilots is, some agencies after running the tool, not knowing certain settings existed within their tenant, which that was pretty alarming if they're managing a tenant and they're not sure about their settings, because like I said, these are complex SaaS environments, and changes come out, all the time. I think, last month there was a new default for Microsoft that came out, which by default enabled third-party app access in Teams, right? And so that's one of our settings where we say, disable third-party unless it goes through like an administrator for approval. And so, those are just some good examples of, some very eye-opening things. There are some nuances, and kind of like, we're dealing with open source products that we've developed. And so, getting agencies and CISOs comfortable with kind of like trusting that has been like a conversation, which I think is been pretty fruitful. I think we've made changes into our software. And then there's also, some concerns with the level of permissions required to run certain of our scans. So, within SharePoint and Power BI, I think it requires an elevated privilege. But these are things that we constantly are in conversations with the vendor community to see if there's changes or modifications that they can make that would maybe push this to a more acceptable level. But that's the nature of an open source project, is you're getting feedback and it's coming in live, and we're kind of making changes and ensuring just that every single release is going to be better and more informed for the next one.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm wondering, and I want to ask this to both of you with your respective programs, but you clearly have to work to a certain extent with these cloud service providers to achieve some level of success. How critical is just kind of increasing the engagement, the transparency between the customer and the business here in your case?
Yeah, so transparency is key for Scuba's success. We operate with Microsoft and Google in collaboration. Whenever we go out and engage with a federal entity, they're with us. They loop in that agency's on the scene support staff, because this isn't something where we're just throwing something over the transit and expecting someone to kind of do it without any support. Like agencies have these access to leverage it. Microsoft and Google are aware of what we're doing. They're working with us. We're providing them feedback. They're providing us feedback. They're working on our baselines, our software. Like, it's a very collaborative, transparent environment, and I think that helps, the adoption, the understanding, and make sure, everyone knows that it's not, pointing fingers at one organization or another. We're all in this together, and our goal is to make sure that people who use these environments are doing it in a safe and secure manner.
Got it. And Ryan, similar question to you. I mean, I think you're getting a lot of feedback about the FedRAMP program, partially from industry right now, and probably always, right? But what's that relationship like? What are those conversations like today? How are you trying to drive forward so you can see success and be secure?
Certainly, collaboration and building those relationships with our cloud service provider and agency community are really key to our roadmap. Receiving feedback through public comment, through other mechanisms, through some of this roadmap release open forums we did has been really beneficial. I see the program continuing to do that. There's a lot of trust between cloud service providers, FedRAMP program, and agencies, right? And communication is really the road to building and maintaining that level of trust, that level of confidence, as we modernize and improve the program. As we look to more data-driven and automation-driven approaches, as Chad mentioned, like do we trust Scuba, right? And it's not I'm not saying that do we trust Scuba, but like these are great products and they're being worked on in a communal way, right? As the FedRAMP program receives data from cloud service providers, being clear on how we're using that, and how we're using that to improve the program. There's a lot of relationship building and management. Another thing I would highlight is, Chad mentioned like the new feature role, new features, new capabilities. One thing we're aware of is, the impact that AI and other technologies are having on that relationship in the market as a whole, right? There's a lot of amazing, powerful capabilities here, but how do agencies configure those in a secure way? How are they going to be used, and then how are cloud service providers using the government data in relation to these new powerful capabilities? So there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of trust building, but I think it's an amazing relationship, and I think you're going to see, and you should see in our roadmap as well, that we're driven by, feedback we receive from our CSPs and our agencies.
Yeah, you mentioned you're getting some feedback on that roadmap already. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing so far?
I think generally the feedback we've gotten is people are excited about it. The pilots especially have been something top of mind. Addressing some of those challenges that CSPs have experienced historically is another thing that I think people are looking for. So we're actively working on moving out on those items. In general, we've also heard that, this is a lot and this is aggressive, but it's refreshing. So I think it's been positive from all the communities we work with across agencies, CSPs.
And I'm wondering, it seems as if, obviously Ryan, FedRAMP is a bit on the front end of when an agency wants to purchase a cloud service. Chad, your program is, how can the agencies configure specific but widely used cloud services? Is there any maybe cross collaboration to speak of between your two programs at this point, or just broadly between kind of CISA's role in advising agencies on cyber and FedRAMP's role in authorizing these cloud services?
I mean, I think it's collaboration is already happening.
Yeah.
And there's lots of room. I mean, if you read the roadmap, there's actually, I think it's in Q4, a mention of including or seeing how we can adopt Scuba secure profiles into FedRAMP. And so what that means is, look, we've done, I think, a relatively good, successful approach with Scuba right now within Microsoft and GWS with our automation of our assessment tools. But there's hundreds of other SaaS products out there on the marketplace, and then thousands of other SaaS products out there not on the FedRAMP marketplace. How can we scale that and try to see if we can mimic that same type of prescriptive guidance for organizations? Whether it's like jointly between FedRAMP, the vendor community, and CISA, and then seeing how we can automate it. I think that one is like, I'm very excited about that collaboration. Ryan and I have been talking for months on this. And then, additionally, like there's a lot of CISA executive and technical leadership on the new FedRAMP, the tag, the governance body as well. So I think, we're working closely together because we have the same goal in mind, and I think that's just going to be better for the community, in the end.
And so Scuba could move beyond just what it's focused on now, Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace at some point in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's our goal, is to see how we can, right now we're in the exploration and planning phase, trying to figure out how it can scale and see what that looks like. But,
Do you think would it stay focused on business cloud applications? I mean, there's a lot out there, or would it expand beyond that?
I mean, I think Scuba's unique focus is on SaaS. So, I mean, obviously, business apps are a very kind of small or relatively defined pillar in there. But you look at something that every single organization relies on is identity services.
Yeah.
Things that like Okta or things like that. I mean, so there's a lot of other SaaS kind of groupings that I think we want to kind of see how we can apply what we've done here to like those offerings as well.
Oh, interesting. And then Ryan, I just want to give you your take just on the collaboration between CISA and GSA here.
Certainly, CISA is one of our key partners as we go through, executing our roadmap. I see Scuba as a big thing that in the FedRAMP ecosystem, that model not only helps agencies, but it can actually help CSPs as well, right? CSP, a lot of services are not monoliths, right? A SaaS provider may use other SaaS services to constitute its services on the back end or as ancillary services. So, if we have a marketplace where there's secure configuration information available for a lot of the SaaS products in it, that can help CSPs get authorized. It can help enable like shifts to more automated assessment approaches and also secure agency adoption, right? So getting the products in the marketplace is FedRAMP's mission, but also, we want to do what we can to make it easy for agencies to leverage those products in a secure way. Some of the other partnerships, we're looking at is, CISA has a unique viewpoint from the work that they do and their exposure to like potential, understanding of incidents that are happening within our ecosystem. Right now within our marketplace, we are often reacting to things. I think CISA can provide some more informative data approaches to, alerting, presenting information to cloud service providers and agencies that may be beneficial and can lead to early action or early intervention. They can also help inform what we as a program focus on based on that, right? Attackers are not sitting still. Attackers are always moving. We've seen the supply chain attacks continue to grow, right? So what are we doing? Which controls are we focusing on? I think that relationship with CISA can really help inform us, and their presence on the tag and board are I think, reflective of that. And building those partnerships with CISA is, again, one of our key things. We're also working with building out partnerships with other groups, DISA, for example, as a trusted authorizing body.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that, the relationship with DISA. Obviously, DoD spends a lot of money on cloud too. Sure.
So, one of the things, I talked about earlier was, there's this review process, after an agency authorizes a service, it goes into our review process before it's listed in the marketplace. You see it being in process. A lot of these groups and agencies have very mature processes, right? So they're checking the exact same things, or many times even potentially more things than we're checking when we do our internal review. So the goal of some of that work with DISA is to recognize what they're doing, recognize their processes, and align, find that common alignment between them. So when DISA authorizes a package, we can get it into our marketplaces authorized very quickly. That's one of the things we're working on with them. I think there's a lot of opportunities to partner with them in other areas as well.
All right, very good. And you touched on how CISA can offer you some unique insights into exposures, threats, and I'd love to get both of your insights just on how your teams are working with the CSPs to keep pace with those evolving threats. There's a lot of, you mentioned supply chain attacks that leverage the cloud in often cases. What are some of the key things that you see that the government industry, cloud industry specifically, can work together on to address in the future when it comes to threats?
Yeah, I mean, I think, within CISA, we have kind of a unique space and an opportunity, especially within the cybersecurity division. Scuba falls within the capacity building subdivision. We have access to our FIGHT team, which is our Federal Enterprise Improvement Team. They have contacts throughout the CFO Act agencies. But then we also, luckily enough, and then Ryan mentioned this, is, we have a threat hunting group. So it's getting access to active threats, going out there and looking at like APTs, their tactics. We're getting that information. It's informing our baselines. We have a vulnerability management team that's looking across that entire space. And then we also have our JCDC, our Joint Collaborative Defense Collective, Cyber Collective, I forget that.
The acronym's right. Yeah.
But that's operationalizing direct partnership and information sharing amongst those CSPs, amongst those technology providers, and at the end of the day, my program benefits from those. We have constant two-way feedbacks with a lot of the CSPs on things we're seeing, on things that we can do better, and they're providing us feedback as well. And I think having that kind of transparent, open dialogue is key to kind of making sure. I mean, at the end of the day, I think all these organizations want to do the same thing, and it's making sure that our products and the products that people are using, especially the federal enterprise, is secure and safe.
Yeah. And Ryan, similar question to you, but in a slightly different way. I mean, I think one area I've heard for FedRAMP for improvement is more quickly allowing new security features to be introduced by these cloud service providers. Can you talk a little bit about that work there?
So, one of the things we're working on are, a non-blocking significant change request process, right? We're, working on running a pilot where some capabilities and some changes are going to be able to be made without with an informed but not an approved step for those agencies. I think that pilot can enable some of those capabilities to be offered. There's a crawl, walk, run approach I think we have to do when we look at how we manage change management within the program. The other thing I would say is around those type of efforts is, as we spin up our platform and we have more data-driven approaches, I think that can help us get out of the way in a way, start removing ourselves from those approval processes, because we'll have data that provides insights into the state of a package, the risks risks or vulnerabilities that may be present without those sort of manual review processes. And the CSP to have that same viewpoint, right? The CSP understanding what we're looking at and having kind of a common view of what a package is, what we're looking at, what concerns or risks or vulnerabilities may exist. Right now, we're working with documentation spreadsheets. I think the data and visibility we get out of our platform will help improve the speed at which cloud service providers can launch those new capabilities under a modified significant change request process that is not blocking.
Interesting. And what's the general timeline for that pilot and how it kind of moves forward?
We're focusing on launching that pilot in June. So we're working rapidly to get that out, building that collaboration with our agency partners, and making sure that we have clear guidance, guardrails, and objectives when we do pilot changes, so we can turn those into real changes within the program after the pilot, to the extent possible.
Okay, great. And just slightly changing gears here, Ryan, earlier you mentioned AI as one area where you're looking at how agencies can configure that in a secure way, as these cloud service providers are, of course, putting these new AI features in. I think GSA recently released a draft emerging technology framework to help agencies adopt AI products and services. How has that been used so far? What kind of feedback are you getting on that framework in this really key area of AI?
Sure. So, we got, I think, over 200 comments back on our draft, right? That we've tried to incorporate those changes into the final framework. Some of the things that we heard was that the concerns around the limits that we had in the framework, we tried to adjust those and clarify that those are going to be flexible and really driven by agencies' needs, right? So that could be more of more generative AI solutions getting authorized after or prioritized after the initial batch. I will say, prioritization is not a blocker. So it's not that other services are not going to get prioritized. It's just that, we do want to prioritize within our review process certain capabilities. Another area we did get feedback is on the benchmarks, right? So benchmarks, collectively, people like the benchmarks, but some of the concerns around the benchmarks were, how are they relating to different agency use cases? So an example could be translation. Let's say there's a need for an AI large language model to do a translation capability. Is the highest performing large language model, or the highest performing, it's also the best ones at translation. There could be large language models that are trained related to specific industries or particular government areas that may be the highest performing, but may not show up on the initial benchmark. So we are looking at ways where we can standardize on kind of standardized communication around what benchmarks are relevant to the use cases and what those use cases are for particular models that are being offered by, as part of a cloud service offering. So if there's a translation functionality, what benchmarks are relevant to that, and just making sure that that's clear and transparent to the agency so they can leverage those technologies after we authorize them.
What's an example of a benchmark within the framework? How does that work?
So there's different levels of benchmarks. I can't get into, I don't know if I can get into the particular details of every single benchmark, but benchmarks generally will go through different types of tasks related to a model. So that might be answering questions, in particular ways. But there's a lot of benchmarks out there. Another potential challenge with some of the benchmarks is there's potential for benchmark contamination. So where the training data sets actually are used to train, where the benchmark data sets or the test data sets end up being incorporated in the training data for models. So you can have models that perform very well on benchmarks and then fail to perform at that same standard in real application.
All right. And Chad, I mean, I'm sure this has come across your desk. AI is being introduced into these business applications. What's been Scuba's view on that so far as you look at some of the changes these services are making?
Yeah, so it's something that's on our roadmap to look at. Within Microsoft, they announced Copilot.
Yeah.
And within GWS, something called Gemini. Both of them are kind of add-ons to those base platforms. And so, once we go through the internal CISA, like a kind of approval process, we're going to get those into our test environments and see how they affect and change some of those configurations. Do we need to, provide additional policies? Does our assessment tool need to adapt to kind of make sure that we're capturing everything? Can we leverage some information from that in order to make our products better? But it's something we're already working on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for both of you, maybe start with Chad here. What are the primary overarching concerns you might have around AI security? We hear a lot about data leakage, spillage, whatever you want to characterize it. There are other concerns. I mean, do you have any general concerns or just things that you're watching to make sure that, hey, this is secure?
I mean, I think Ryan mentioned it as contamination.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been tracking kind of on my own time. And anytime there's data poisoning, mm-hmm. and then people assume that data is accurate when they're using it for whatever output. And so I think there needs to be a lot of security around there. But then also just the misuse of AI and how it's kind of proliferating. To make phishing emails more effective, right. And things like that. So I think that's not necessarily against AI models, but a misuse of AI technology, which is something we're watching.
Yeah. And Ryan, anything to add beyond just you just mentioned the data contamination? Anything else?
I think, one thing from a FedRAMP perspective that's kind of feels familiar with AI is the shared responsibility model, right? So yeah. There's AI offers, and then there's the users or deployers of AI, which would be agencies. So, understanding from that context, what, similar as the Scuba scenario, what is the owner's manual for the car, right? What is that AI provider doing if they're filtering out, certain content to make sure a large language model does not give a hateful response, right? Making sure the agency's aware, hey, this is something we're doing, and this is not something you necessarily have to worry about at that level. Or maybe it is, right? Depending on the model they're using. So I think a lot of communication between agencies and the providers of AI technologies is really important for them to understand their responsibilities. so they can implement them. AI can be transformative. It's going to offer, I think, a lot of potential for agencies to improve their mission delivery, both internal to their enterprise and even on the public facing side. But knowing who's doing what, and it can really help inform responsible and safe use of AI.
All right. You mentioned the shared responsibility model, so key to cloud security. I guess I'm just wondering, how is that evolving today? How do you think your respective programs can drive it forward? Maybe start with Ryan and then go back to Chad in the room.
So I think that's actually where Scuba provides like some of where that could start, what that can look like in the future, right? Where, right now cloud service providers are providing a set of controls as a customer responsibility, but that set of controls often isn't, there's no button to say like, are we meeting them? With technology and the Scuba framework, agency could have a high degree of confidence that they've met their responsibilities and that a SaaS product is configured in a secure way. I'm not saying that all the controls that an agency are responsible for would be covered, but many of those controls. Being able to do that for a large portion of the SaaS providers mean agencies can adopt those services quickly. They can do automated assessments, potentially mapped back to their responsibility, those customer responsible controls. And that really helps adoption. It also provides us a high degree of confidence that the product is actually configured in a secure way. And I think one of the most beneficial parts of that is, so with a framework like Scuba, you're not relying on yearly tests, right? You can test that configuration daily, right? So the drift that might be experienced from an agency is something that's now manageable. You're doing continuous assessment, and potentially even continuous authorization, where you're not doing these annual assessments because you have that visibility.
Chad?
I mean, yeah, for us, like the shared responsibility model is, what we kind of push, right? So, I mean, within CISA, we have the Secure by Design campaign, which is all about, these product companies building their products securely, right? That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece is making sure that they're used and configured securely, right? And so it is a shared responsibility model. It can't just be, all on the end user's responsibility, or it's not all on the vendor community. I mean, there's two, both of them have a piece to play in this, and so making sure that they're each doing their part is kind of critical.
How are you navigating the tension between just the customizable features, the configurations that cloud services provide versus you mentioned secure by design, and then the corresponding secure by default, and a push to have these providers maybe offer products more secure out of the box?
I mean, we've seen instances where some of our findings and some of our baselines are now being turned into defaults within those product vendors, right? I think a couple of the major CSPs announced by default to add phishing resistant MFA as default, which is fantastic. And we would like to see more of like some of our we call them shall policies become more default for those offerings. At the end of the day, that would make me very happy. All of those CSPs are just offering extremely secure by default configurations when they're deploying new offerings. We're not there yet, but hopefully we're working towards that.
Yeah. All right. So going forward, how do you see Scuba's assessment tools and the products, frameworks you're putting out being used? What should folks be expecting next from the program?
So we have a couple pretty exciting kind of announcements. One is we're in the process of releasing and launching a new add-on feature for both scuba gear and scuba goggles. We're calling it Scuba Connect. And so what this is, it'll be available on GitHub. It'll be a voluntary add-on for organizations that have sub-tenants if they're managing multiple tenants. It's a way that a centralized organization can basically run scuba gear or scuba goggles on their behalf and pull those results back centrally. So think about a federated agency who has lots of bureaus and they want to run those tools for their entire organization. This will allow them to do that. Or, non-federal speaking, maybe there's an MSP who has multiple customers and they can run it in their customer environments and pull those config assessments back. So that's one feature. Looking forward to launching that relatively soon. And the other one is, I didn't talk about it much today, but we have our entire work stream about visibility. So I know we talked when we launched the Extensible Visibility Reference Framework, and we've been really busy working on operationalizing that guidance. And so what that means is we're going to be developing an open source tool available on GitHub that will allow organizations to do those assessments, via a tool that we're developing.
That's a great point, and good news on the Scuba Connect. On the visibility piece, briefly, what is the visibility framework?
So Extensible Visibility Reference Framework is, one of the findings out of SolarWinds was the lack of visibility or lack of logging practices at certain agencies. And so, similar to how we wanted to provide baseline configurations, we also wanted to look at providing baseline visibility guidance for organizations. And what we mean by that is, looking at what they currently have within their enterprise, where are they blind to what sort of attacks, and then, so it shows a decision maker at that agency where they should either turn on telemetry, turn on logging. Maybe they need to make an investment to buy a sensor to make sure that they have a total picture of all of the telemetry that's coming in and out of their environment.
And so now you'll be coming out with a tool that corresponds with that framework, similar to Scuba.
Yeah, so it'll basically do an assessment on their environment. It'll be just how we kind of operated Scuba gear and Scuba goggles. It'll be completely unique to that environment. So an agency downloads it and runs it in their organization. The data stays with them.
Okay.
So it's very important. That's part of like open source and trust is like when we're not trying to pull back data unbeknownst to the end user. So like anytime an end user downloads one of our tools, it's theirs.
Interesting. Okay. All right. And then Ryan, same question to you. I know we've talked a lot about where FedRAMP is going today. What would you want to highlight for folks though that's coming down the pipeline?
I would say, really looking at our roadmap, those are going to be our Q4, Q3, Q4 items, those pilots that I've talked about, we're going to have those coming out or those are going to be moving forward. We're going to be looking at ways to improve our general processes and address some of those challenges that we've seen. So I would expect to see some drafts coming out on, how we're approaching FIPS as a program, how we're handling service integrations within cloud service providers. So when cloud service providers leverage other cloud service providers, how we approach that in a consistent way with all authorizations. And then the pilot also with our low review process where we're doing that with DISA. I think that's going to be a key pilot that can reflect how FedRAMP can improve the authorization process and also help accelerate authorizations going forward. So really exciting things. I think a roadmap really speaks to them in a great way.
Okay. And just moving forward with the conversations around introducing, new AI products and services, is there anything specific that FedRAMP is going to do with the draft emerging technology framework to kind of update or finalize that going forward?
We're certainly moving on getting that out as quickly as we can and making sure that it meets the intent of the executive order and the needs of agency customers. So I expect to see that soon.
Stay tuned. All right, sounds good. Well, again, I would like to thank today's guests. Ryan Palmer is Senior Technical and Strategic Advisor for FedRAMP at the General Services Administration, and Chad Poland is the Cybersecurity Product Manager at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Again, I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Cloud Exchange.